Welcome to the stream, everybody. Today, I want to talk about this book by Edward S. Curtis. It's not actually his book in the sense he compiled a number of portraits into different volumes, and someone has taken some of those portraits and put them into this volume. And it's a book that defies a regular book review, where I could talk to you about what's happening, read you some ideas. It's almost all portraits of different Native American tribes. And so when I thought about how to review this, I thought, well, I could share with you some of my favorite portraits from this book and give you a bit of background on Curtis himself. But one of the challenges was, by the time that Curtis was doing this, let's say late 1800s, early 1900s, a lot of the Indians had already abandoned some of their traditional dress or traditional ways. And so in some ways, some of the portraiture is staged. And he has criticism for this, but he also gets a lot of praise for actually taking the time to do any ethnographic studies of them. So I'll give you a little bit of background on Curtis, and then pretty much for the rest of the stream, apart from any questions you might put in here, I'm just going to be showing you some photos of these Indians from different tribes. You and I know, and if this is Curtis speaking, you and I know, and of course everybody who does who thinks of it, the Indians of North America are vanishing. They've crumbled from their pride and power into pitifully small numbers, painful poverty, and sorry weakness. There won't be anything left of them in a few generations, and it's a tragedy, a national tragedy, Curtis wrote to his friend George Bird Grinnell in 1898. Bird, I believe I can do something about it. I have some ability. I can live with each of these people, get their confidence, understand them, and photograph them in all their natural attitudes. I can start and sell prints of my pictures as I go along. I'm a poor man, but I've got my health, plenty of steam, and something to work for. And if you read that and then you find out what happens to him later, goes bankrupt, loses his marriage, a number of other bad things happen to him. But we have this great work and other studies he did, including a film. So as I say, I'm going to just try to show you as many portraits as I can, try to answer questions you might have, and we'll see how we do. Now, you'll see in some places he has them surrounded by fabric, and it's because by this point they're already wearing a lot of modern clothes, and rather than seeing them wear modern clothes, he wants to just cover them in a blanket and focus on their faces. So this caption, it says, not too difficult to see, an unhappy Tewa Indian child snapped by Curtis in 1905 pouts at the camera. She is wearing a print fabric over modern clothes. And this girl over here is a Navajo. The child is not pleased. Yeah, I think it's hard to get children to sit for photography. I remember that growing up with my family. Young children, it's hard to keep them still. So here, it's quite majestic. Oz Sioux. His gaze is emphasized by the blanket and headband. This was taken in 1903. This is a Navajo woman wearing a silver squash blossom necklace, heishi necklace, concho belt, and pleated skirt to show costume. Blanket draped over her shoulders is the same one worn by the woman on page 29, different page. And again, you see this blanket technique to focus on facial features. If a lot of it's funny. I'm showing you some sad, quite a few, and obviously there's a lot of sadness and context for that sadness. But so far I've only been showing you sad photos, but there's quite a few joyful ones as well. So this one on the left, 1907, Kahatika, once part of the Pima, lived in 5 small villages 40 miles from the Pima reservation. Legends suggest that the Kahatika bands escaped into the barren desert after attacks by the Apache and stayed put. And then this girl here, Curtis wrote, "It would be difficult to conceive of a more aboriginal than this Mojave girl. Her eyes are those of the fawn of the forest, questioning the strange things of a civilization upon which it gazes for the first time. She is such a type as Father Garces might have viewed on his journey through the Mojave country in 1776. There's a lot here, including very famously Red Cloud. Red Cloud is this gentleman here. The one on the right with the large portrait that we have there is Elk Boy. And if you don't know about Red Cloud, it says here, Chief Red Cloud is one of the most well-known of all Indian chiefs, mainly because of Red Cloud's War, a series of conflicts that were later found to be caused by the whites. There's more that we'll be talking about on the channel later next year when we start talking about some of the history that the United States has with the tribes. This gentleman here is Red Hawk. Red Hawk was an experienced warrior who fought under Crazy Horse, then later at Little Bighorn. And I think for many people, this might be one of those characteristic images that they have in their mind of what a Native American looks like, keeping in mind that that's such a broad category. There are so many different tribes in the United States, but here's one example of one. This is Plenty Coops, a crow. Features with pompadour. That's his head. The way his hair is raised up. Traditional temple braids, beaded buckskin shirt, and shell beads around his neck. I have a little beef with the crow because they fought with Custer at Little Bighorn, but that's a different discussion. Here. That gentleman's name, Bull Chief, and Apsaroke, is shown here, looking petulantly in the camera and wearing a buffalo bull horn headdress. He was said to have been born in 1825, making him about 83 when this portrait was taken in 1908. This one's, unfortunately, the caption's on the next page, but just so you can see this picture first. I think it's a very lovely picture of this woman. The rush gatherer, an Arikara woman, holds rushes which were important to the tribe for weaving mats used as floor coverings. The tall rushes also serve as an effective outdoor backdrop. It's another very representative. And as Curtis matures in his work and does this for a longer period of time, he starts to focus a lot more on the facial features and what people are experiencing, because you've had a chance to talk with them and live with them, more so than the dress. But the dress always still gives us some kind of backdrop, unless we have a blanket, as we've seen. Look how beautiful. Look at, I'm going to show this to you. Look at that. Focus of this half-length portrait of an Arikara woman is not as much on her facial features as on the 6 strands of hair pipe. She likely frequently wore her hair in that fashion. Well, I would too if I had that kind of beautiful extensions for my hair. So um, really wonderful, and obviously very solemn, quite majestic in the way that she looks. Um, George is saying kind of like braided sweetgrass. Yeah, something like that. And I suppose I shouldn't ignore over here on the right. Another, these are two very majestic photos next to each other, aren't they? On the right, it says looking tired, eagle child, and Atsina man, shown in profile wearing a buckskin shirt and headdress. He was born in 1862. And I don't know if you can tell. I mean, this is he used a particular type of technique that just has this wonderful gold patina. And you just think of our modern photography. Can we even take photos as good as this with all of our digital exactitude? I wonder sometimes if we don't miss something with digital. Here's another really wonderful picture. Look at that. Well, there's two actually. I feel like I'm trying to show you one picture and then I end up showing you two pictures. So let's talk about the girl first. Arikara girl. The straight profile image is of an Arigara type. To call attention to the girl's features, Curtis used a flat backdrop and a minimum of ornamentation. So saying a type is what he observed in them, what they characteristically tended to look like as a tribe. Okay, so the one I'll flip back to show you. This half-length portrait of Bird Rattle, a Pegan man, shows him wearing a beaded buckskin shirt, feather, and a loop necklace. The background appears to be a clapboard building, 1909. Here's another sort of obsession of his, was to look at facial features in terms of lines. I mean, what an expressive face. I mean, how much has this woman experienced? You know, what are the stories that she could tell? The Ancient Arapaho is what he titled this. Curtis, like other photographers, was fascinated with deeply lined, characteristic faces. In this portrait, the subject has downcast eyes, is wearing plain clothing, and is set against a neutral background to call full attention to the face. 1910. A family. So what's interesting about this shot is obviously the wife and daughter are in, I'm going to try to stretch that so you can see the daughter's face a little bit more, are in full traditional dress, but he's in modern clothing. And that's a lot of the times what was happening was you would see some of them already ditching their traditional clothing and they were wearing modern clothing for various reasons. I don't want to tell them what they can or can't do. It's their tribe, it's their traditions. But you I thought that picture very wonderfully characterizes what was happening at that time. So it says it's a half-length group portrait of Reuben Blackboy and family, 1910. Native cultures were quickly being overwhelmed by the white world. While visiting many tribes, Curtis struggled to find photographic subjects who still wore their clothes and hair in a traditional manner. Look how ornamented and decorated their clothing is. And I have to imagine that's not everyday clothing, obviously. That's not work clothing. These are obviously beautiful show clothing that you would wear on special occasions. But the contrast with the practical modern clothing here is significant. Here again, we see some of that, but this is just inside a teepee, mother and children. Running Owl's family, an adult woman and two daughters seated on a cloth on the floor of a lodge wearing beaded cloth dresses. The beaded dress of the younger girl appears to be the same one worn by Wild Gun's daughter on another page. See if I can bring that any closer. This is a Cheyenne woman. here. Sorry, I'm showing you two photos again, and I'm talking one. There's two here, but I'm focusing on her, Cheyenne woman. Focusing again on a type, Curtis accentuates the features of this young woman's face. She appears to be fairly heavily bundled. So that's how he thought a female Cheyenne typically looked. And again, he's taking on from the time that he's living with them and observing them, and it's fantastic that they let him stay and study them, actually. So look at that. And so you have a bit of a headdress. Headdress always, I think, calls to mind the idea of feathers for those of us, but here obviously is a headdress for a woman. Half-length portrait of the wife of Minianak. The collective name Yakima has for many years been used to designate all the Confederate groups on the agency built around the true Yakima, which includes some Wishram and Wasco of Chinookan origin. But what a beautiful dress. I don't know if you can see these beads. And this is one of my favorite photos in the book. Look at this baby carrier. Have you ever seen such a thing? It is just beautiful, well designed, and that's just a traditional thing. A formally dressed flathead woman is standing near a tree holding her baby in a cradle board. That's just something that they normally designed. And obviously, it makes sense that cradle board could serve to be carried almost like a backpack, the way we would think of a backpack, but on someone's back as you moved. How cute is this kid? Look at that. Flathead childhood. This full-length portrait of a Salish boy posed wearing a costume and headdress is likely one of the happiest, most exuberant portraits taken of Curtis by the Indians. This is in 1910. What a cute kid. This image here, 1905. Again, the blanket in order to accentuate facial features. Nespelim woman, 1905. As he did with many of the intriguing faces he found in the Southwest, Curtis wrapped this Nespelim woman's face in a blanket, both to draw attention to the features and to remove traces of modern life. Didn't want us to see the potentially modern dress that she was wearing underneath. So this one's really interesting. So those coins that are part of her headdress are Chinese coins. So you trade for different things of different value, and somehow Chinese coins were considered valuable in this part of the world, and so then they were woven into a headdress. A Wishram bride, 1910. Curtis found that Wishram marriages were strictly business, with the families negotiating a suitable price for the bride, usually by messenger. This young Wishram bride is wearing a headdress with Chinese coins and a beaded dress, items all undoubtedly obtained by bartering their surplus salmon for goods delivered by visiting traders. Again, quite something, no? Again, this feels very characteristic to me. I don't. How can I know what the candidate, the subject of the portrait was thinking? But it feels very representative, no? So left, Curtis says a typical nape. They would say ne parse. It's nez perce is how we would say it in English in America. Despite Curtis's title, there is little about this Nez Perce glaring at the camera in this full-face portrait that is normal. He's wearing a full headdress, hair pipe choker, and has his hair braided. So, in a way, quite formal, but in a way, not normal either. And this goes back to this idea of what is it that's being captured? Because sometimes here You can see there's buttons on a modern shirt here for this gentleman. 3 eagles, an old man when photographed by Curtis was a Nez Perce Indian who fought alongside Chief Joseph. In this portrait, Curtis has given him a faraway look. Try to see some things in the chat. Tatting Girl, thank you. And Tomas, hello. Hello, Tomas. Hope everybody is having a wonderful day. Again, these astonishing headdresses. Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce is one of the most well-known of all North American Indians. Curtis made friends with the old chief and had the opportunity to photograph him not long before Joseph's death in 1904. So this was done in 1903. We're coming towards the final 10 minutes of the stream. I feel confident that I'm actually going to get through all these photos. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to, but I think I will now. Here are a couple lovely young girls. So this one here is a Quileute, 1913. This young Quileute girl, covered by Curtis to feature her face, is wearing a slight smile. Curtis is likely struck by her dancing eyes. And the one on the right is a young Quinault, Quinault, wearing shell ornaments. So you can see, I mean, you can see how finely worked all that is. And this was done in 1913. Close enough to our time to not feel so very far away, but far enough away that we sense that loss. We sense that time, that separation we have from them. So the reason I picked this one, I mean, look at it, enormous abalone earrings. Those are enormous. Abalone shell is not very heavy, but still, just a man who doesn't wear earrings, you know, I don't know what that would feel like, but those are enormous earrings. She is a let me see if I can say this right. Sawatanok, 1914. She's wearing a bark cape. You might not be able to see that, but just tree bark. I really like this one. Her. She's a Tolowa. According to Curtis, this was the gala costume of Coast Athapascan women. The ordinary dress was a deerskin kilt with the opening at the front protected by a fringed apron of deerskin or bark. See if I can bring that any closer. Functional and beautiful. Here's one of the rare full-length shots that we have in the book. A Klamath man models a full costume including leather gloves with a beaded leaf pattern. In case you missed that, you can see that leaf pattern on his gloves. Here's another cute kid. Look at that. Hoopa mother holding baby, 1923. The Hoopa lived in small villages of rectangular plank houses, wore buckskin aprons and skirts, and excelled in basketry. These basketry skills are apparent in the baby carrier. I mean, you can see how finely worked they are. I feel like I'm not going to be able to show that to you. Here's another really beautiful portrait. Chukchansi, also known as Yokut woman, 1924. Curtis's romantic Indian images by this point had been replaced by emotional photographs of suffering people. This change may have been an honest reflection of his subject's poverty, but it may also have been a product of his growing awareness. So, a little bit more about Curtis. During 1924, when much of the work for these volumes was done, Curtis helped to found the Indian Welfare League, which, among other things, was able to gain the vote for American Indians that same year as part of the Indian Citizen Act of 1924. So, photographer um, and an activist of sorts. There's another couple wonderful portraits there. The gentleman on the right, a Jemez Indian, 1926. The people of this pueblo speak Towa, a dialect of Tanoan. The pueblo is located on the Jemez River, 30 miles northwest of Bernalillo, New Mexico. Like many of the northern pueblos, they were participants in the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 and suffered the traumas and punitive expeditions that followed. More on the Pueblo Revolt in the future. And this is Shuwati. She's a Sia woman, and she's got a pot, a beautifully made pot on her head. The Zia are known for making fine pottery with white or yellow buff backgrounds with varied naturalistic designs of deer, birds, and leaves. She is also wearing a squash blossom necklace, the beads of which were often pounded from coins. If we can get any closer. All right, last one, is I've got to head over to Palestine Bookshelf. We're talking about Christian Zionism today. This last one, can you guess what part of America they're these are Eskimos. Of this particular tribe, the Noatak, 1929. Curtis and his daughter Beth spent 16 pleasant days on Nunivak Island among the Noatak Eskimos, people he described as happy and content. Indeed, of all the portraits appearing in the 20 volumes of the North American Indian, the Nunivak people are the most unguardedly happy. Curtis was pleased to have finally found a place where no missionary has worked, and wasn't shy about saying he hoped things stayed that way. I think he's speaking about Protestant missionaries in particular, but discussion for another time. Edward S. Curtis, Portraits, The Many Faces of the Native Americans. I had heard about this book, put it on my wish list, and then I went into a bookstore and saw it on sale. And as I've said before, sometimes books find you. When you go into a bookstore, you go in looking for one thing, you leave with something else. And so I'm really glad I had a chance to see this. As I said, I didn't really know how I could review this book other than just to show you some of the photos and encourage you to maybe check it out yourself. And I'm sure quite a lot of his work is online as well. So if you want to peruse and take a closer look back at these people, I think it'd be worth your while. So if you enjoyed the stream, hit like, subscribe, share, and send it on to your friends who might be interested in Native American culture or ethnography in general. And I will see those of you who are interested on Palestine Bookshelf. We'll be discussing a film on Christian Zionism. Thanks to all of you who came along and spent some time with me today.